Hey everybody, this is Brandon Gaudin, former voice for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, and you're listening to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. Go Jackets, go ACC.
What's going on, everybody? This is Joey from Basketball Conference. Just wanted to drop in here and add a quick note before we get into the episode. This was recorded about 6 weeks ago. As I sit here recording this and finalizing the edit, it is Friday, May the 9th, and we recorded this episode in late March. It's been about 6 weeks, so I just wanted to acknowledge that and apologize. It has been an incredibly busy and exhausting time for all three of us with the Basketball Conference podcast, myself, Mike, and producer Scott. We have talked repeatedly about getting this episode edited and posted, and it has just not happened so far, and that's our fault. We apologize to you. We apologize to Justin Ferber, especially, who took his time to come on here and record with us. And I do feel like the content is all still very much relevant and something that's going to be it's a really good discussion that we had, and I think a really good kind of overview of everything that Virginia and where they're at, both from a player roster standpoint, from a coaching standpoint, even from an administrative standpoint. It's a very interesting time in Virginia athletics as we head into the 2025 fall season. So just wanted to acknowledge that. Yes, it's been a little while. This is still relevant content. Appreciate your patience. This has been a tough offseason, I think, for all three of us in some different ways. And so appreciate you sticking with us. We do have another episode that we're going to be recording here in the next couple of days. We're going to do a news dump. It has been an eventful time in the ACC, to say the least, the last couple of months since we last did a news dump. We've got a new coach that we got to talk about. A coach was fired, and an interim was hired in the time being. There are some shenanigans going on in Chapel Hill. I don't know if you've heard about any of those, but we got a lot of things that we're going to talk about. So keep it tuned here, youtube.com/@the-ACC-football-podcast, wherever you find your podcasts, on Spotify, on Apple, anywhere else. Please keep it tuned here. We will have some more content coming your way as we roll towards the end of the offseason and get into preview season. We're looking forward to it. Appreciate you sticking with us. Apologize for the delay. But as for now, let's go ahead and get into this episode, this great state of the program for Virginia with Mr. Justin Ferber. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to Basketball Conference, the ACC football podcast. My name's Joey Weaver. He is Mike McDaniel. Mike, state of the program series continues at long last. Who we got with us tonight?
Justin Ferber, Cavs Corner, talking about UVA. What's up, Justin?
Yeah, good. Glad to be back. I guess we're on Cal and Stanford hours right now, but glad to be back on. And spring football's right on the corner.
Justin, really appreciate your time as always. It's great having you back on the show. I think it's important that we start out by mentioning the thing that we always say on this here show.
Virginia's awesome. Virginia's awesome.
Yeah, that's it. That's the thing that we say. I pressed it twice just to make sure it came through.
Is.
Virginia's awesome.
Perfect. Thank you.
Wanted to touch base with you, kind of where things stand with the Cavaliers football program here as we work our way through the offseason. Figured as soon as the basketball tournament is, in full swing, is the time to be doing this. It is March 25th as we have this conversation. 5-7 in 2024 for Virginia. Honestly, like, relative to preseason expectations, that probably either met, if not even maybe exceeded them a little bit. I mean, I remember thinking that it was a year that I was thinking that Virginia could take a little bit of a step forward. And then I looked at the schedule and I was like, oh no. But then, yeah, I mean, you got pretty close to bowl eligibility. I guess, I saw the look on your face when I said that it felt like it might've been a bit of a step forward. Maybe you disagree. I'm curious to your take, maybe kind of the feeling of the fan base on, was this a building year versus was there still some disappointment that it should have been better?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the record, I think you could easily make the case that it was improvement, right? Like, I think when we did the show in, I guess it was August or July, whenever it was, I think I had them at, 4 wins, 5 wins, and figured it would really depend on how well they started off the year. And they actually started off the year a little better than a lot of people figured. They were 5-1 or 4-1, out of the gate. So things were looking good. And then they had a really rough middle stretch of the season. Got blown out a bunch of times. Then they randomly beat Pitt, but it turned out, I mean, at that time that looked like a good win, but then Pitt ended up kind of falling off the table, at the end of the year. And then they kind of had another little bit of a rough stretch to end the year, a little bit of a quarterback controversy. Then they lose the rivalry game at the end of the year. So I wouldn't say necessarily they made tremendous strides forward from the previous year. They were definitely better and more competent. And there were definitely some things that they did better than they did in 2023 when they won 3 games. But ultimately, it kind of just kicked the can down the road to this year. I feel like there's a lot more pressure on the staff this year. Last year, there really wasn't any pressure. And now I feel like things are starting to ramp up. And, you know, they definitely didn't take a step back. But also with the portal and everything, different team this year that, I mean, I don't know how much that building that you did last year is going to pay off this year because there's so many new guys across the roster.
Wanted to ask about Des Kitchings because, you know, I think the natural question coming out of the regular season last year, especially with the 2 rough stretches you mentioned, was, okay, what is Virginia going to do to shake things up? Because we thought shaking things up was starting Anthony Calandria, right? Like we were thinking in the preseason last year, you know, I know you mentioned on this podcast that the coaching staff was trying to decide whether or not they wanted to move forward with Calandria or Musket, because 2 years ago it was Calandria early in the year out of necessity. They went to Musket, the veteran. Then out of the gate last year, like, no, we're going to start Calandria. And it worked out, and then it didn't. And then there were the good games early in the year, and then there were a handful of really, really bad ones where you're like, okay, is this even the guy? I mean, yeah, he's young, he's sophomore. Like, is he even the guy? So Calandria is off to UNLV. Musket graduates. You bring in Chandler Morris at quarterback, but which is great. I think that's a great transfer add. But I think the question coming out of the year was, are they going to fire a coordinator? Are they going to shake up the staff at all? Were you surprised that they didn't?
Yes and no. Yes, because I think the results sort of dictated that you would want to do something different, but no, in the sense that Tony hasn't fired anybody since he's been there. Like, I mean, they had a couple of guys leave voluntarily. Basically, all the guys he held over from Broncos staff have gone, you know, at this point. Higgins went to Penn State, and 2J went to NC State, and then Senton went to Illinois, and now he's somewhere else. But yeah, I mean, other than that, you know, like, nobody else is left. So I think at this point, like, you call it loyalty, you call it whatever you want. I mean, Dabo is kind of the same way. I mean, I know that eventually he kind of started shaking things up, you know, with his offensive coordinators and stuff, but he didn't like making changes either. And he liked promoting from within. And I think that's sort of where Tony gets it from. And I think he feels like they needed to upgrade the talent more than the coaching. Time will tell whether he's right or wrong about that. I do know that there were some concerns going into the portal last year about, you know, like, are we going to be able to sell guys on what we're doing as, you know, like a potential landing spot? Because you talk about quarterback, like, Chandler Morris is a guy that's played a lot of football, but like, if you're trying to get a guy that's like, hey, this is my shot at the NFL, or I want to win 10 games, you know, and you're saying we're going to bring everybody back from a team that, you know, just hasn't put up a lot of points, like, is that going to be a good pitch, even with the NIL and everything available? And that's the route they decided to go. And I guess I think it's one of those things where they'll either be proven right or wrong pretty definitively this year. And I think Tony is okay with kind of like giving his guys a shot to turn it around. And if they don't, then, you know, they're going to have to make changes wholesale. Right. So.
It is a huge upgrade, it feels like, going from Tony Musket, Anthony Calandria to Chandler Morris. By the way, I just want to call out while we're talking about Anthony Calandria, he's going to UNLV to play for Dan Mullen. If you want a sleeper for your college fantasy team in the fall, that might be a place to look, because he might be really fun in that offense. Chandler Morris, though, coming in, I mean, he's spent multiple years at North Texas, has thrown for a ton of yards. Seems like he's getting some transfers in with him in the receiving core, offensive line. Does that seem to be a strategy right now for Tony Elliott of how quickly can we upgrade this roster versus trying to continue to do the high school long-term build kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, he talks a lot about wanting to be a developmental program, and I think they're going to continue to put an emphasis on that. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge the reality of the situation, right? Which is you have the ability to go out and get transfers. Those guys are going to be the guys that are going to be playing a lot because they're older or more accomplished. And you're going to have to lean on those guys to win in a place like Virginia, and you're going to have to accept a certain amount of churn with your roster, right? You're not going to go out and like in Ohio State or whatever, they can recruit so well out of high school that they can just add a few key guys and then be good, right? Whereas like UVA is probably going to have a blend of the two. And this year, I think they were sort of fortunate because they were enhancing their NIL budget already, but then after the season, they got a very substantial anonymous gift, which it completely transformed their ability to go get more players and entice players to come. And I can tell you pretty definitively, I think they have like 18 new guys. If that gift had not come in, they probably wouldn't have been able to get 2/3 of those guys. They would have gotten other guys, but like those guys specifically would have been on to other places and things like that. So, you think like Monroe Mills from Louisville, for example, like that's a guy that was like, when he goes in the portal, he was like the number 2 tackle or something at the time, when he went in, and he went in with the do not contact tag and was here within a couple of days and signed. So, that's definitely not what we're used to, around this program. I think UVA has typically had to go to places like Ivy League schools and, like I get like mid-major type programs and G5 and hope that you can pull guys up, but they've been much more competitive in the portal this cycle. And that's the hope, is that they're able to sort of reboot the roster. And, like we mentioned, the coaching staff, I think they're betting on the staff being able to win with these guys and then also retain players that you needed to retain. Obviously, like Calandria had to go because there was clearly not a fit. He got benched by the end of the year. And they needed to reboot that, but they were able to keep, at least so far, because things can change in the spring, a few key guys, and then we're able to go out and add a lot. In the area, I think where they needed the most help besides quarterback was just on the lines, both sides of the ball, because that was a big part of their issue in the passing game last year, was just sacks, and just not having time, and they couldn't really get an effective running game going either. So I think they've really upgraded their lines, and time will tell whether those guys can stay healthy and be good. But this roster is in a much better place than it was a few months ago.
Wanted to ask about NIL in terms of like the state of NIL around Virginia's football program, just because I'm not personally very familiar with it. So I'm just curious. You mentioned a couple times how Virginia's been a little bit more competitive with NIL this time around, right? In terms of retaining guys, going after guys in the portal. What do you attribute that to, right? Because the coaching staff, I know, at least to date, it's been very rocky, right? So it would almost be like a vote of confidence, like, oh, great, we're going to be more competitive in the portal. That's fantastic. Do they feel like they just need to arm the current staff with more resources? Is this something they feel like they just need to do because we got revenue sharing coming, we got all this stuff coming? It's just a natural thing that we need to do to be competitive, regardless of who our coach is. What do you kind of attribute it to, this kind of renewed push to upgrade the roster?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of all those things, right? Like the person I mentioned, the anonymous gift that they got, like that specific person released a statement when they did it and basically were like, this is why I'm doing it. And they said they had faith in this coaching staff. But I think some of that is just what you say. You're not going to be like, I'm giving it to them because I don't think they can coach. So I'm trying
This
to.
is the only way they can get guys in the door.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I think I don't think they're capable of getting talented players. So I'm going to make it happen. Right. Like nobody's going to say that. I think with UVA, it's an interesting thing because and I think honestly, the ACC, this is probably not foreign. Like I'm sure there's a lot of other people that would say the same things about the programs that they cover. It took UVA probably a year or two for people to kind of like get used to it or like accept the change. Like that first, and I mean, you saw like I'm thinking about like Miami basketball, that first NIL year where they went out and got a bunch of guys, and everybody was like, "What is this? Like, what are they doing?" And now everybody does that. So like,
right.
I mean, not everybody's going to have that much money to spend, but like everybody's doing that same thing now. Like the charade is kind of over at this point. And I think for UVA people, it was kind of like, and there were a lot of people at UVA. I mean, at one point, I'm not a historian, but like there was a time at this university where they did a whole report, and they were like, should we even be competitive in sports, or should we be like a D3 school and just focus on academics? This is a long time ago, obviously. But I mean, like there are a lot of people that are just not comfortable with it. But I think people are coming around and realizing, I mean, you think about like Tony Bennett with the basketball program. He didn't want to do this. Like he just was not comfortable with it. But even he eventually came around to being like, all right, this is what we have to do. And obviously he decided not to stick with it. But, you know, I think that's kind of where everybody is. And they understand like, hey, you know, like if we're not doing this, everybody else is going to be. So like you have to kind of decide how competitive you want to be. You know, with rev share, they're going to be competitive with it. I think, you know, they're not going to, they're splitting their money the way everybody else seems to be, you know, in terms of how they're going to allocate it to football and basketball mostly. But, you know, I think they're going to try to be competitive, and they don't have as big of an alumni base as some of the other schools in the ACC, and certainly not as much of an appetite to raise money for football, or like, you know, to give money to football, I guess just to say. But I think so far with what they've done in the last like year or so, they've been much more competitive than they have been. And I think they're continuing to sort of drive to be as competitive as they can be. But ultimately, I would imagine that they'll probably settle into the middle third of the ACC in terms of, you know, how much money they're willing to spend. And for basketball, it's a little, you know, they're going to probably be in the top third.
All right. I do have to ask before we go any further. You mentioned this anonymous gift that came in, and it was anonymous, but there was a statement that came along with it.
Yeah.
Is this a thing that was truly anonymous, or were there like rumblings and rumors around the fan base that kind of pointed to it being one or two prominent alum? I'm curious. Maybe not, but this seems like the kind of thing that the message boards would be doing a lot of speculating.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
End up somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of speculation. I can tell you that I know who it was. But like, you know, obviously I'm not going to dox them here. But yeah, I mean, I think like when you kind of, and they were actually on the back of that, I think what UVA was trying to do was like take this money and one, use it to get players, but then also, and honestly, what this person was doing in a lot of ways was backfilling money that a lot of schools already had, you know, and just kind of making them more competitive. And, you know, this year is a little bit of a one-off because you have rev share coming. So this year is supposed to be, at least in theory, the last sort of unfettered NIL year where you're just like throwing all your money into that pool. You know, so I think that was the idea, was like, hey, let's go get it now. But they tried to use that gift to raise more money, and they were successful in doing that, you know, because it's like, okay, this person's doing it. You know, I could, you know, if I add this, or another person came in and said like, hey, I'll match every dollar donated by all other donors up to, I think it was $3 million. So like that sort of stuff works. But yeah, I mean, everybody's kind of going through this right now and trying to figure out like how to make it work. And I think UVA was fortunate that this happened when it did. I mean, I'm not going to guarantee that it's going to lead to a bunch of wins, but I think the hope is, you know, you invest in the roster this year. You hope that you start winning games. There's some proof of concept. You can do it again, right? And then maybe you'll get more donors because people will see that it's working. You know, it's delivering results.
Right.
Joey, I'm realizing I have a lot of big picture questions tonight. The next one's about Carla Williams. So I think, yeah, I'm a Virginia Tech alum. We do a lot of this like tinfoil hat stuff with Babcock too, because of the whole Brent Pry thing. But Carla Williams, there has been speculation about whether or not she's going to be around for the long haul, whether or not Virginia wants to retain her, you know, because of how this Elliott thing has gone, whether or not she'd step down because there's instability, right? I guess, well, there was instability with basketball. I think solved that as we sit here recording. Virginia just hired Ryan Odom for basketball, so I think they're in better shape on the men's hoop side. But then football with the instability, I think a lot of people were just naturally pointing to, okay, is Carla Williams going to be around? It's the same thing Virginia Tech's doing with Babcock. So what's the status of Carla Williams? Do you think that she's going to be around long term? Do you think that she's in a position where, you know, if this football season goes south, her job might still be safe and she'd be making the next football hire? I know some of this is speculative, but kind of where do you kind of see her in the broader landscape here?
Yeah, I would say in the immediate future, her like place at Virginia will probably be determined by her own appetite to do the job, right? So like she just signed an extension a few months ago. UVA's been kind of weird about this stuff, like cagey. Like they didn't release any sort of statement on it. People just FOIA'd it and found out basically, and and that happened actually with some assistant coach contracts too, which is kind of standard operating procedure, but it's just weird when you don't announce things. But yeah, I mean, I think like it's been a kind of a tumultuous few years for her, and it's not all her fault. Like it just isn't, like the shooting happened. There's a lot of stuff that she had to kind of carry for them in, just kind of being the face of the athletic department. You're dealing with grieving families, you're dealing with the legal ramifications, the background work that had to be done on like the response to the incident, and then also the players that are still there and coaches that are still there trying to deal with it too, right? And then you have all the other stuff changing around college sports, and all of that, all the while like Tony Bennett retires and she's got to deal with that, and there are a lot of things, and not most of those things didn't have anything to do with her, right? And then Bronco quit out of nowhere, before Tony got here. And that's just a lot to kind of deal with, and you have to wonder like how she feels about it. But she did sign an extension. I would say at this point, like from the university perspective, like I don't think she's in any sort of jeopardy. You have to remember too, UVA has like a very successful athletic department outside of football. So like they just won a national championship over the weekend in swimming, right? So like, and I know that stuff probably doesn't move the needle for a lot of people, but it does move the needle for people that have money at UVA. And that's, far from the only sport that they've been successful in. And, I think like the basketball search, like I know that there were a lot of people involved with that, but like, I think that went the way people wanted it to go. And, with football, I think her hand will be sort of forced. Now, I mean, she might get in a weird situation if they go like 6-6, because you might have some people that want to make a change and some people that are like, all right, they made a bowl game. What are we trying to do here? But ultimately, I think she's pretty safe for now. I mean, I think with football, like if they have to make a change, they might just kind of do a situation where like they get some other voices in the room, to make that decision on who takes over. But I mean, I'm not saying like she wouldn't get to make the call, but it's smart to have other people sort of involved in it too, especially since like this was her hire. And if it fails, kind of, it's on her, but it's her first football hire. And the only other hire that she's made that really didn't work out was women's basketball. And she's already replaced that coach with another coach. So we'll see what happens, but I don't think it's one of those situations where it's like a lot of schools, the football coach is about to get fired, so you're also getting fired because you hired them kind of thing. Like, I don't think she's in a situation like that right now.
Yeah, we saw that at Georgia Tech where Todd Stansbury didn't want to fire Jeff Collins, so the president fired them both.
Yeah, I mean, I could see a situation. I mean, I don't think this is going to happen, but like if she was like, I refuse to make a change, then I think somebody over top of her would be like, well, you're going to make it, or someone else is going to make it.
I'll show you a change.
That's sort of like just insubordination. I don't think she's going to do that, but like we just talked about with the coaching staff though, like they didn't make him make any changes. So, and there was I think the one area that they could improve is just communications. Like they don't really talk to us much. And then, like the football season ends and you see like athletic, like a Tech, for example, like I know people probably weren't happy with things necessarily, but there was kind of like a public acknowledgement of that, right? Like after the season, it's like, all right, we're going to have a press conference or we're going to release a statement or something. We're not happy with how things are going, but this is what we're going to do to get there. Like UVA didn't do any of that. So they got blown out by Tech and then the season just ends. And then it's like, okay, so what do we do? And then the next thing we heard basically was like, they got this anonymous gift. It's like, oh, cool. But yeah, I mean, like
PR, baby.
Like, we were like, are they happy with this product? Or are they not? Like, are they kind of like, this is your last chance, kind of like we didn't really get any of that from them. So
I think it's interesting though. You continually are mentioning, or you've mentioned a few times I guess kind of some of the existential discussions that have to happen kind of somewhat within the building, but even within kind of the booster core and the, I don't know, whoever the powers that be that surround kind of Virginia and Virginia athletics, of like, we're moving into this new world of college sports, and like, how badly do we want to, conform and do this versus, do we want to stick to whatever original mission, or whatever, like, and it's, I do think that that's something that is more prevalent in the ACC across a lot of different programs, probably, rather than any of the other power leagues at this point. And then obviously, with the House settlement coming up soon, and there's going to be compensation coming directly from schools to players, like that's a thing coming pretty soon. I guess it seems like Virginia has decided, like, yes, we are going to commit and do what we can to try to support athletics and play ball, and in the not literally go out on the field and play, but like we're gonna play ball with what it takes to succeed these days. I guess is that the sense that I get, that's what's coming out of the athletic department?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you could see that in the basketball search. Like, I think Odom wanted to be here, but like at the same time, if UVA wasn't pledging a certain amount of resources, like he could have gone elsewhere, right? You're not going to set yourself up for failure in that way. And that'll be the same situation they'll be in if they have to make a football change, right? I mean, if they're going to go out and hire some coach, that coach is going to want to know that they have a chance to succeed. Just same as it worked before NIL, where it's like, hey, do you have facilities? Do you have, money for the program to, recruit and do all the stuff that they need to do for the staff, So there's like a certain expectation of commitment. And when Tony Elliott got the job, the day he got hired, UVA's like board of visitors released a bunch of money to fund the new football building that is now open, right? And I think I wouldn't be shocked if he had something to do with that. It's like, all right, well, if you show me this commitment, that'll make me feel better about this, right? And Bronco was trying to get that thing done for years. COVID happened, so that didn't help the cause. But I think like that sort of stuff matters. And now you're going to have to show that with resources, specifically with rev share and NIL.
We'll be right back to the episode, but wanted to give you guys just a quick reminder about section103.com. It is the internet's premier place for all things wonderful Georgia Tech apparel. They have t-shirts, they got sweatshirts, they got hoodies, they've got things for men, women, children, babies, something for the whole family. Find it all at section103.com. Use promo code GOACC at checkout for 10% off your first order. I love mine. I've been a customer for years. They have been so good to us. They've got such great looking things using the official word marks, all the official colors. It's can be tough to find Georgia Tech gear sometimes, but not when you go to section103.com. Everything looks great, super high quality. We've really enjoyed it. It's very comfortable. It holds up to the test of time. I wear mine all the time. I love mine. You will love yours. Section103.com. Once again, use promo code GOACC at checkout for 10% off your first order. Make sure you follow them on social media. They've always got different deals going on, promos that come out, especially when Georgia Tech has a big win, one of the teams. So make sure you keep up with everything going on at section103.com. They've got NIL shirts, lots of vintage apparel, all things for your Georgia Tech fandom. One last time, that is at section103.com. Use promo code GOACC at checkout for 10% off your first order. Shout out to Steven and the gang, as always, for being huge supporters of the Basketball Conference podcast. We really appreciate it. You guys go show him some support, section103.com. And now let's get back to the show.
Wasn't that like, I remember there was a whole back and forth. They were trying to like get across the finish line with Elliott, and like he came to Charlottesville, then he flew back to Clemson.
Yeah, he did.
Was that just contract based, or was that facilities based? I
don't think it was like money for him and his contract so much. So that was kind of a unique situation because he came up here. Usually, by the time a coach comes to the school, it's over,
done,
right?
Yeah, it's done.
And I think that's where everybody thought it was going. And UVA basically was like, I know that there was already some momentum towards getting the money for that building, like across the finish line, but they have to have a meeting to approve it, and that meeting was that Friday morning, and he was here on Thursday, and Wednesday night and Thursday. He also, I think, part of the complication there was he also was being courted, at least to some level, by Duke, like because Mike Elko got
Mhm.
his job like 2 hours after Tony Elliott got his. And so he kind of was like weighing those two. And also maybe saying no, so he went back. But I remember talking to somebody who covered Clemson, and they were basically like, this is who he is. Like, he just is a very like thoughtful kind of person with this. Like, he's not going to just sign, and I think that was just kind of a weird situation. And I had people ask me, like, did they think UVA fans were like rubbed the wrong way by that? I don't think so necessarily. That search was just strange because everybody thought they were going to hire Anthony Poindexter, and then they didn't.
Yeah.
And I think Tony was more qualified. Anthony's more of a fit, maybe like, he's a UVA guy. But ultimately that was her choice. And, I think the money coming across for the football facility that day was not a coincidence.
I remember when that happened, that seemed like that was the first time where Carla Williams, I remember this a while ago, and this is pre-shooting. I mean, this is forever ago now. But I remember that seemed like the first time Carla Williams actually was catching a little bit of heat on social media. It was like, how are you not getting this across the finish line? And then, he was signed shortly thereafter. But I remember there was a little bit, and again, it's trepidation from like the fringe fans on social media. Take that as you will, but like that's what people like me see, right? From somebody from another fan base.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it makes sense too, because like before that, she didn't really have a lot of controversies. I mean, women's basketball wasn't doing well, but that's kind of on the periphery, right? For a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
All the other like non-rev sports were doing well. Basketball won a national title in 2019, so just 2 years earlier. And then COVID happened, so like that threw everything out of whack for everybody. And then Bronco just quit like out of nowhere, right? It wasn't planned. So she didn't exactly have like a lot of time to get ready to do the search. Basically the opposite of the basketball search that they just did, where they had months and months and months to do it.
Right.
So, I mean, they kind of had to do it quick. And it was like, all right, they're not going to hire Dex. And then the Elliott stuff happened, and it was like, oh, so now he might not take the job. So then, like, what does that mean? Like, how does that reflect on UVA? Like, why wouldn't he want it? Is it like an investment thing? Is it some sort of like, not being comfortable with the job or something for some reason? And I mean, like, I can tell you, like, if they pivoted from there, if he didn't come, like, it would have been an interesting situation that they might have found themselves in. I'll just say that, with like, who the next candidates were and all that. So, I mean, I think it hasn't worked out on the field, but, given the circumstances, I think like everybody was happy with how it went down when it went down that way.
Yeah.
At the end of the situation,
You're Illy saving face with like a qualified candidate on paper. It's like,
yeah, exactly. I mean, it didn't go really, really sideways. I think the hard sell was that Tony was coming off of a weird season at Clemson, right? Where they had been not as good. And it was like, all right, like who is this guy? Is he the guy that, won all these games, had the great offense, or is it something else? And is he more like dependent on talent, And I think we're about to find out in 2025.
Yep. Mike, you good to look at the schedule real quick?
Yeah, we can do that. Yep.
Because we got the schedule announcement, obviously, since the season's end, Justin. And so we have actual dates for all these games. And I had to start by proposing that Virginia is probably a candidate for weirdest out-of-conference schedule in the country.
Maybe, yeah.
Out-of-conference games, Coastal
NC
Carolina at NC State, William and Mary, Washington State. So you've not only got an out-of-conference game against a conference opponent, but then you also have Washington State coming into Charlottesville, which, sure, interesting how that all came to be, I'd imagine.
Washington State needed a bunch of games because they lost their conference, basically. So that's how UVA ended up with them. I think UVA goes to Pullman at some point, which I probably wouldn't have done.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's not exactly a fertile recruiting area for UVA. But it's funny. It's funny too, because we were talking about it. We're like, man, they're always good with like Dickert, and then Dickert leaves, and we're like, well, we're gonna see him anyway because UVA plays Wake this year. So it's kind of funny how those things, and it basically brought like 20 dudes from Washington State. So you're basically just gonna face Washington State in a different color. But yeah, interesting non-conference schedule for sure.
Yep.
And the NC State thing is weird, but honestly, I think most people, I know this is how I feel, but like, I'd probably rather see that than see them play Kansas. Like at least it's a nearby school. It's like there's some familiarity. It doesn't count towards the standings, but it's not going to feel like a one-off game against somebody nobody cares about.
Yeah.
It's probably only a 3 or 4 hour drive from Charlottesville too. Like,
yeah, it's not bad. 3.5. Yep.
Yeah.
Quick trip. And then they come to Charlottesville next year.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Yeah. Conference schedule: Stanford, Florida State, at Louisville, at North Carolina, at Cal, Wake, at Duke, Virginia Tech. I mean, you miss Clemson, you miss Miami. Honestly, like, degree of difficulty within the conference doesn't seem too bad. I look at, you got 2 bye weeks this year. One of them kind of smack in the middle between the Louisville and Washington State games, but then the other one comes after game 11.
Very interesting second bye.
Yeah. Right. I guess was there an overwhelming sentiment one way or the other on, like, seriously, you waited till the end to give us a bye week, or hell yeah, we got a bye week before we play Virginia Tech?
I think it had something to do with, like, the rest of how the schedule played out, because they have to go, like, back-to-back road games, including the West Coast trip, with no bye or something like that. So they had to basically fit the bye in. And then also you have the way the schedule worked out. There's this year in the ACC, there's not a lot of like Georgia Tech playing Samford type games. Like, everybody's playing everybody, and there's an uneven number of teams. So they had to give somebody a bye. Unless there was like a non-conference game scheduled, which I don't think there is one. So, yeah, I mean, that's just the way it worked out, but it's definitely odd. I mean, when the schedule was coming out, somebody texted me and was like, I think we're going to have a bye before the Tech game. And I was like, that's never happened. Like, that you wouldn't have a bye that late. But, I think having one bye, I mean, there's a lot of seasons where you only have one bye anyway. So I don't think it really hurts that the second bye is so late. But honestly, I think this is a pretty manageable schedule. The only thing that gives me pause is I said that in Elliott's first year, and the schedule ended up being harder than it looked, because Syracuse was much better than people thought. People thought Duke was going to win like 2 games, and they won 9. And then UVA was worse than people thought. So, you never know. And Stanford, we don't even know who their coach is going to be at this point. Yeah. So. Who knows? But yeah, Andrew Luck might just have to put a headset on or something. But yeah, I mean, I don't think it's too bad. I mean, you have Cal trip in there, but it's a private charter plane. Like, I don't think that's so bad. And I think if you just look at home and away, I think it's pretty favorable. I mean, you mentioned they have to go to Louisville and North Carolina. But you don't have to. For this UVA program, you don't have to win all those games, right? You can lose those 2 games. You have opportunities to find a way to get to. I think they probably need to get to 5 conference wins, or 4 at least, to have a solid season. I think NC State and Washington State might end up being kind of a split. Yeah, I don't know. NC State, I don't know how far you guys are into your State of the Program series, but I don't really know what they're going to be.
They're in a weird place.
Yeah.
A new offensive coordinator, a bunch of new guys, a bunch of guys left. So I don't know what's going on there. And that might be one where
Washington State is.
Yeah. And honestly, I think the who is UVA is a different question than we've seen in years past. I think in the past, we're like, they're somewhere between, like last year, it was like, they're going to be somewhere between 4 and 5 and 6 wins, depending on how easy their schedule is, how many close games they win and lose. This year, I think there is some upside with this team. If they hit on the portal guys, you've seen it at other places. Like, you can all of a sudden go from 4 wins to 5 wins to 7 or 8.
There's a decent shot, and I mean, we'll have you on to preview the season. Later in the summer, we'll have a better idea of what the roster looks like, all that good stuff. But like, there's a chance here, I think, on paper, as we're looking at it in March, understanding who's on the schedule and what these teams have lost and kind of the question marks they have, that I think you're right. Like, if Virginia hits on these transfer portal guys that everybody seems to feel pretty good about, right? All the recruiting services seem to think that Virginia did pretty well with the portal. Virginia's coaching staff obviously feels good about things. And then you look at how the schedule lines up. The questions about NC State, Washington State replacing a coach, Stanford replacing a coach, Florida State coming off of a 2-win season, Louisville, should be pretty good. Carolina so many questions about Carolina with Belichick, how that's going to work. Replacing a coach. Cal is replacing coordinators. Wake's replacing a coach. I mean, you go down the list, and it's like, Duke probably pretty good. Like, Manny did a great job year one. Virginia Tech's got a ton of questions. I mean, I think that there is certainly a scenario where Virginia makes a bowl game, looking at it on paper, not to jump the gun too early, but like, that's probably enough for Elliott to stick around, I'd imagine. I know we had the conversation about Carla might have to make a decision at 6-6, but like, I'd imagine you're showing progress making a bowl game. He's probably sticking around, especially with rev share coming, all that good stuff.
Yeah, I think some of it might might come down to what it looks like too. I think the decision will actually be kind of easy because there's been some runway here, and obviously, we mentioned the shooting a couple of times. Like, that definitely changed how much time you're going to give a coach and like how much leeway you get for certain things. But I think he's had the runway at this point. They won 3 games, they won 5 games. It's time to show it, right? And this schedule is not like, I don't want to hear anything at the end of the year about like, we ran into a really tough schedule. Like, I mean, none of these teams are that talented, even if they're better than we think or worse than we think. Like, even like in North Carolina, I mean, it's not like all of a sudden they're going to have this amazing roster where like no chance to compete with them, or shouldn't have a chance. And I think that's true with a lot of the teams, on the schedule. Basically, everybody on the schedule. They don't have a single game on there where you're like, they have no chance to win that game. Because every team in the ACC is something, even like Louisville, and Duke, you mentioned, like, I'm confident that those games will be very difficult to win. But, like, those teams, UVA was really close to beating Louisville last year, at home. And they had them in the fourth quarter and blew it kind of late. But, I mean, the ACC is kind of up for grabs in almost every game, and that's what probably makes this podcast so fun. But, I think, like, if Tony can get them to a bowl game, then you've seen some progress. If he can't, then it's like, hey, we spent all this money on this roster. He's had 4 years. You kind of seen enough, right? And I think everybody understands that, including him and his staff, right?
Yep.
It's kind of put up or shut up time. 6-6, it depends. Maybe you had an injury in there. Maybe you won a bunch of games early, but then melted down the stretch. And maybe that goodwill of getting to the bowl game doesn't really matter. Who knows? But ultimately, I think like they're either going to have a pretty solid season and maybe that's the start of a turnaround, or maybe it's a 1-year blip and next year we'll go back to 4-8. I mean, we've seen that before, especially in the portal era, that could happen. But I think this year is kind of the pivotal year one way or the other. And they have every opportunity to be better with the investment they've made in the roster and a workable schedule.
Yep.
Mike, I think I'm good if you are.
Good. This was great, Justin. Appreciate it, man. Always good to have you on. Give you an opportunity to plug all your stuff where you're at.
Yeah, CavsCorner.com. We are in the thick of basketball transfer portal season, new coach season over there. We're still spring football stuff, but it's been a little bit of a slow start to the spring. So a lot going on, and looking forward to being back on with you guys in the fall when we have more football stuff to talk about for sure.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I for one can't think of a better time to be doing basketball transfer portal than in the middle of the NCAA tournament. So just fantastic timing for all involved.
Yeah. Yep. Well, really well thought out. Great job, guys.
Was as most things in college sports are.
Yeah, just killing it these days. Justin, you're the man. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to having you back on soon. All right.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Yes, sir. Mike, that's Justin Ferber, Justin Ferber, CavsCorner.com.
There it is.
I'm good at talking. That's why I do a podcast. We are going to come back. We got some news we got to hit on. We got more state of the programs we got to record. We got a lot of things coming your way this offseason. Please keep it here. iTunes, Spotify, anywhere else you go find your audio podcast these days. YouTube.com/@the-ACC-football-podcast. Please hit the subscribe button. We'd appreciate that. Send us an email, basketballconferencepodcast@gmail.com.
Nailed it.
Thank you. And where else in the socials, Mike?
Facebook.com/basketball conference. Rate, review, find some of our stuff there. YouTube, keep subscribing to YouTube. YouTube.com/@the ACC Football Podcast.
Yep. Please do. Please do. Mike, you want to come back and keep recording some off-season content?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. For that guy, Mr. Mike McDaniel, for Mr. Justin Ferber, I am Joey Weaver. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll talk to you again very, very soon. Until next time, go Hoos.
Virginia's awesome.
And go ACC.